Welcome to the American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th Anniversary podcast series. In this commemorative series, past presidents and other leaders of the American Nephrology Nurses Association will provide a rich history of the association itself and of nephrology nursing as a specialty nursing profession. The American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th Anniversary podcast series is brought to you by the Nephrology Nursing Journal, the official journal of the American Nephrology Nurses Association. We are honored to present this episode, and we hope you enjoy these invaluable and enlightening nephrology nursing recollections.
Hi, my name is Beth Ulrich. I'm the editor of the Nephrology Nursing Journal and a past president of AANNT. Today it is my honor to interview Lois Bernbeck, who served as president of AANNT in 1973 to 1975. Lois, I want to thank you for talking with us today about nephrology nursing.
I'm looking forward to it.
So let's start at the beginning of your nephrology nursing career. When and how did you become a nephrology nurse, and what was your first nephrology nursing job?
Well, I was a clinical specialist. I had just gotten my master's degree, and I was a clinical specialist at D.C. General Hospital in Washington, D.C. And they had a new nephrologist that had come, and he wanted a nurse to work with him. And so nursing wanted me to work with him because they didn't want somebody to just say yes, 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 yes. And so that's how I got into it. At that point, I knew nothing about nursing, nephrology nursing. I shouldn't say about nursing. I knew a lot about nursing, but nothing about nephrology nursing. But we ended up being a consulting service. We did a little bit of chronic peritoneal dialysis. We did a few acute hemodialysis. All of this, of course, I had to learn. And we even took a few kidneys and sent them over to Georgetown.
It's a time when everybody did everything.
That's right.
So you were there at the beginning of the association when it was birthed. Tell us about that time and about starting the association.
Well, that was also funny. Dr. Cizik, who I was working with, said, "Would you like to go to ASAIO in Atlantic City?" And I thought, well, he's asking, he's sending me. Sure, I'll go. I didn't know what ASAIO is. He could have said ABCDE. So I went to the very first meeting, and I enjoyed all the presentations because, of course, I was starting to learn more about nephrology then. And at the end of it, they said, "Today we are going to have our first meeting of the new association, American Association of Nephrology Nurses and Technicians." And so I stayed, and they said, "And all of you are charter members." So I was a charter member of this organization. And like I said, it was just a matter of getting to know what was going on, etc. And then I volunteered to do things like stuffed envelopes was how I got involved in doing something with the nephrology nurses.
And then when Betty had to resign the presidency, you became president sooner than you expected to, I think.
Yes, I did. I did. But, that was all right because I had enough support from people.
Right.
And I was in Washington, D.C., and there were people like Lo Binkley there and John Frank and people that supported me. So it was fine when I was doing it. And it's a matter of trial by error, and a lot of it was a trial by error. At this point, we did not have Medicare. Well, by the time I got into the association, they were just getting into Medicare. And dialysis being under Medicare. But until then, we had no way, unless you had money from your insurance, to dialyze you, etc. And it was after that the government took over that we had chronic dialysis. Before then, we had to make decisions on who got dialysis and who didn't, which was not the greatest decision in the world to have to make. Transplant was nowhere near. I know they still need lots more kidneys, etc. But at that point, they didn't even have what we have now. And so it was a matter of blindly trying things out and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and sometimes laying awake at night thinking, what are we going to do about whatever the problem was? And so that was a hard part of being in nephrology at that point.
In addition to that, what other challenges were being faced in nephrology or by nephrology nurses, or even the association getting started at that time?
Well, it was a matter of getting the association working as an association. We had no executive director. The office was the president's home.
Yes.
You know, we were spread out. We had a council of 27 people running the national organization. We had, by the time I got in, formed the 5 regional vice presidents, but everybody that was heading a committee was on the national council. So we were sitting there having meetings with 27 people, all of whom wanted to get their 2 cents in.
I saw a picture of one of those meetings when I was reviewing some of the pictures from back then. It looked like a full room.
Yes, it was. It's the only time I smoked cigarettes. We had no executive director, nothing like that. We also needed to get into having input into what the rules and regulations were. And that's when the people running Medicare ended up finding out that coming to the nursing meeting, and they were sometimes paying for their own hotel bills, etc., to come to our meetings because they realized how much nursing had input into their things and could make or break things. And so they wanted to come to our meetings and get input from us and give us input so that we knew what was going on, how to get home dialysis as opposed to dialysis in a unit, peritoneal as opposed to hemo, how to exchange information. It wasn't until the end of my term that we started the journal. And so there wasn't that. We were starting at that point. Once we had regional things, there were regional meetings. And so there was starting to be exchange on a regional as well as the national level of information between people. And that was so important so that everybody knew where to go for information. And one of the things I learned from that is I wasn't afraid to call up anybody and say, hey, we're having this problem. Can you help us out? And everybody was very willing to help us. And that's probably still true. And people probably don't do that enough when they're struggling with a problem, is to figure out who can you call in the association that will help you, that has this information. And people are more than glad to help you with the information. And don't be afraid to do that. That's what we need. Exchanging information, listening to one another, getting ideas from one another, listening to patients and what are their problems and what can you do about them. And sometimes you can't do anything but listen. And that's all right. That's what patients need, people to listen to them.
I think it's hard for people today to imagine starting an association having to do everything by land mail and having to do everything by telephone, because we're so used to having easy access to people now with email and internet and those kinds of things.
We didn't even have computers at that point.
Right.
So we were typing on typewriters. I used to send out, when people would send me information, I used to send out a letter to all these 27 people, And I used to just type because I had no way to go back and change anything. And so people would say, we're calling them my epistles. Trying just among ourselves, exchanging information of what was going on in the organization. But there was in some way to do it. After I gave up the presidency and Marty took over, what they decided is that the regional vice presidents and, the president, the past president, the secretary, and the treasurer would be the national council. And that was a much more manageable situation. But that was okay. I mean, we had to go through growing pains to figure out what would work and how to make things run. And by the time I left, I think we had 1,000 members. And I think then we had enough that we got an executive director. And that worked very well.
Well, and I suspect 1,000 members was a huge percentage of the nephrology nurses across the country. It hadn't expanded so much by then.
That's right. When I moved, and I was president at the time, but I moved in 1974, I was the only master's prepared nurse in all of Michigan.
Wow.
And there weren't PhD nurses at that point. So, everything was in its infancy. And it was fun for that reason. And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed meeting all the people and going around the country and visiting. And it was a great time to be in nephrology nursing.
Absolutely. So what did you do in your career after you were president of AANNT?
Well, I was an assistant director of nursing at the University of Wisconsin Hospital for a few years, and then I went into teaching in a 2-year nursing program. So I really, at that point, got out of nephrology nursing per se. But, I kept a hand in it. I still taught nephrology in my program. And I still look back and have some of those friends that I met in nephrology. So that was fun.
So before we end, what short message or thought regarding nephrology nursing, past, present, or future, would you like to share with our listeners?
Like I said, be willing to share what you know. Be willing to call up people. Be willing to listen to people. Be willing to listen to your patients. That's true of no matter what kind of nursing you're doing. The best thing you can do is listen to your patients.
Lois, I want to thank you for your service and leadership as president of AANNT and for allowing us to interview you. We very much appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Okay, and thank you for all your service.
The American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th anniversary podcast series is brought to you by the Nephrology Nursing Journal, the official journal of the American Nephrology Nurses Association. This series is owned and produced by the American Nephrology Nurses Association. All rights reserved. No portion of this podcast may be used without written permission. For archived episodes of this podcast and to learn more about the American Nephrology Nurses Association, visit the association's website at annanurse.org. You can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, our hosting site Spreaker, and other various podcast delivery services.